outline, but today, because of what I want to say, I have taken the effort to try to write it out. We live in an imperfect world. It was created by God perfectly, but then Adam and Eve sinned, and their children sinned, and their children after them, and again, until just a few seconds ago when one of Adam and Eve's children sinned. Oh, not anybody here. You're all on your best behavior, but one of your sisters and brothers out there just sinned. And the effect of all that sinning throughout history up to a few seconds ago is to break down the perfection of the world God created, to tear it apart at the seams, to destroy its wholeness and its integrity. Now, Jesus came to reclaim that world and to restore it to its original grace and glory. For that, he suffered, died, and was raised up. But despite his sacrifice, we continue to sin, and the world continues to crumble apart. And the world we live in, with all of its brokenness, is the result of all of our sinning. My sinning, your sinning, everyone's sinning. It destroys the fabric of the world in all its beauty, its oneness, its completeness. As a nation, we have felt the effects of this sinfulness and the crumbling of the world around us in an up-close and personal way in the past few months, and especially this week. Now, I'm not an economist, so I can't begin to tell you how this week's election will affect the global economy or your own personal retirement funds. I'm not a historian, so I cannot tell you how those elected compare to those who have served in office in the past. I'm not a political scientist, so I cannot tell you how the winners' decisions and policies will impact foreign and domestic relations. But I am your pastor, your shepherd, your father, and like you, I struggle to be a person of faith. And so for a few minutes, I want to reflect with you on how we as Catholics are called to move forward at this point in our country's history. As always with every election, some people are delighted and some people are dejected by the outcome. I know a lot about that since I'm usually on the losing side. When I was in 8th grade, I proudly wore a Nixon button and was depressed when he lost to Kennedy. 12 years later, when I was a newly ordained priest, I was deflated when Nixon won, since I was supporting McGovern. But we live in an imperfect world. 8 years ago, Obama won. Some were delighted and others not. And in 8 years, we did not achieve perfection, nor did the world come to an end. 8 years before that, Bush won. Some were delighted and others not. But again, in 8 years, we did not achieve perfection, nor did the world come to an end. We live in an imperfect world. Perfection will not come simply by the election of one candidate or another. No single candidate can make perfection happen. It is the work of God in which we are all called to share. This past election cycle has made us acutely aware of how deeply divided we are as a country, not only by the vitriolic rhetoric and the open hostility towards individuals and groups on both sides, but also the failure of 24-hour, nonstop commentators to recognize the depth of the chasm among the people of this country and the intensity of the pain of so many. The jolt we feel in recognizing this acute alienation is akin to receiving a diagnosis of a serious, life-threatening illness. Shock, disbelief, anger, numbness, frustration, and an overwhelming awareness of just how clueless we are about what is all around us. How are we to move forward? We hear and read all kinds of advice, from advocacy for the protests in so many cities this week, to petitions to do away with the Electoral College, to plans for a million-woman march on Washington on Inauguration Day, and the opposite advice of hunkering down, hiding in your own cocoon, and withdrawing from any involvement in politics or societal concerns. The work of moving forward cannot be the task of just some of us. No matter who we supported or who we voted for, we are all in need of healing, and we are all called to work for unity. While individual candidates can be winners or losers, we the people must do all we can to ensure that we are all winners. Those who lost must not sulk and withdraw from engagement, waiting to win the next time around. Those who won must not use their power for recrimination and self-advancement. Rather, we must come together to work for the common good of all, of individuals, of the country, and of the world. The Jesuit priest Father James Martin, in a current article in America Magazine, suggests a twofold approach for Catholics and others as a way of moving forward: reconciliation and dissent. While his article is too long to recap here, I just want to outline some of the steps he proposes. Under reconciliation, he calls us to give people the benefit of the doubt, to listen carefully and reflectively to what another is saying, to avoid name-calling and hate speech, to offer forgiveness, which we are all in need of, we are all relieved to receive, and we all find so difficult to extend, and to pray for grace, wisdom, and courage. He then addresses dissent and challenges us as Christians to have what he calls not a pro-choice stance, but a pro-voice stance, and to recognize that we are called to voice legitimate dissent, to oppose repressive policies, and to stand for the poor and the marginalized. As Christians, he calls us to be pro-voice on behalf of the poor, pro-voice against racism, pro-voice against xenophobia, pro-voice for the environment, pro-voice for all the marginalized, women, minorities, African Americans, LGBTQ, and for all who feel excluded and all who live in fear. In the scriptures today, we hear about the end times, the death and destruction foretold by the Hebrew prophet Malachi, and the apocalyptic warning issued by Jesus in the gospel. They were not speaking about this past Tuesday or any election day in the future. We live in an imperfect world which continues to unravel because of sin, but continues to heal because of grace. It is God's work in which we are called to share. We come together in this church today and always, not as a red congregation or a blue congregation, but as a purple congregation, a paisley congregation, a patchwork congregation, a tie-dyed congregation. Our motto says it in 6 words: diverse in background, united in faith. And we come together at this table like any family coming around their family table with our differences and our longing to be one. We come to this table, all of us sinners and all of us struggling to be better. We come here to be reconciled and to have the strength to be prophetic when the world needs to hear another voice, a voice it doesn't want to hear. We come to this place to accept the fact that no matter how we voted this week, we cannot and must not be separated. We must move together into the next 4 years and beyond and take up the work of building a better future, a better country, and a better world. In the end, it may not be perfect, but we can all strive to make it better.